Hey everybody, Tony D back with another video with special guest Joan. Come here, come here, little Joan. Little Joan doesn't want to come here. Okay, so what are we doing today? We are doing getting started, building a premise and getting started. That's what people ask me, a lot of times in the real world. There she is, little Joan says hi. How do I get started on my damn screenplay? Okay. First, you got to think of your premise. You got to boil it down into a sentence. I know your idea is so fabulous, it requires many sentences to describe. But that's not what you need to get started. What you need to get started is one sentence. So, if you look at James Bond movie is what kind of movie? It's a spy movie. That doesn't mean there's not comedy and romance and action and all those other things, and drama, but at heart, it's a spy movie. And that's what you need to narrow down part of your sentence. What kind of movie are you making? Are you making a sci-fi? Are you making a drama? Are you making a comedy? Now you might say, well, I'm making a horror comedy or a sci-fi drama. Well, you have to decide which one of those elements is really at its core. Okay? So, if you look at this is a TV show, not a movie, but if you look at the Orville, I think the Orville is an example of an idea, despite the amazing talent behind it, it's just not working. Not for me. It's supposedly a sci-fi comedy, but to me it's not enough of a comedy to be a comedy, and it's not enough of sci-fi to be a sci-fi thing. So it sort of tries to split the difference, and ultimately I think both elements undermine the other. There's also some other elements in there that, that don't really work for me either, but mainly it's not funny enough and it's not sci-fi enough. And if it just sort of picked, it was more sci-fi and had a little bit of comedy, basically you'd have the old Star Trek, because there was plenty of episodes that were, had funny moments. And if you went the other way, less sci-fi and all comedy, it would be a lot funnier. But I don't think they can go in that direction because they've established too much in the show to let go. And so I think that's the conflict there. So, but, that's a network show done by a big name creator. You don't have that luxury to make that mistake. You've got to boil down your idea into that one sentence. You have to, so you can move forward with it. Don't worry, you'll add plenty of other elements, but boil it down to what its core constituency is. Okay? So if you're writing a sci-fi movie and you got elements of comedy and you got elements of drama and other elements, that's fine. But just for this one sentence, say what it is. It's a sci-fi movie about blank, whatever that is. And your movie can be very complicated, right? So you take a complicated movie, I think it's fairly complicated, The Usual Suspects. Because of that twist ending, spoilers, because of the twist ending, The Usual Suspects, it would be difficult to describe in one sentence. But what is it? It's a crime drama with a twist ending, or it's a crime drama about a crime lord who can't be caught, told from the point of view of a suspect or something like that. Obviously, you don't want to give away the ending in the description of the movie, but you want to just have some of the elements and the big plot devices that are in it. The big plot devices in The Usual Suspects are this massive crime lord and the story being told, by a suspect or one of the gang or whatever you want to call Kevin Spacey's character. And that's it. That's all you need. There's lots of other characters in that movie. Lots of other stuff happens. You can't describe it all in that sentence. And you don't want to. You're trying to get at the root of your premise so you can move forward. Now, how do you get started with the actual writing of the movie? Well, depending on your premise, you really want to sit down and watch any movie that's close to your premise. You know? And you want to, if it's a premise like that's very common, let's say it's a revenge story. Obviously, you can't watch every revenge story movie that's out there. So you want to watch some of the better ones. So go online and do, top 50 revenge story movies or whatever. If you're doing a spy movie, you want to watch the top spy movies. If you're doing an action movie, etc. So you want to look at the best. If you've got something that's fairly common, and more than not, you will. And there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody has their take on a revenge movie. Everybody has their take on everything. You may have a unique premise and you go to search and you don't find anything that close. But there'll be something that at least is in the ballpark, right? And if you have to weed out the movies, try to see the good ones. The bad ones, if there are a lot of them, don't bother to watch them. Yeah, I know, you maybe watch one of them to see their mistakes, but ultimately, you want to get the good ones in your brain because you definitely don't want to repeat what the good ones did. Because those good movies will be remembered most, and you don't want to copy them, Now, there's a fine line between copying and homage. Maybe you want to sort of give a wink and a nod to one or two of them, but don't go too nuts in that area. That's inside movie stuff. That's inside baseball. Your average fan may or may not get into that. And a lot of the genres, you don't want to do that. Comedy, it's okay because obviously if you're doing a comedy, there's lots of parodies involved. And so you tend to have a lot more leeway. But with other things, you run the risk of people mistaking you for basically stealing from that movie. And you don't want that either. Hollywood does it all the time, of course, especially for Japanese movies and other animes and all kinds of things they've done over the years. So generally, it's not something I recommend. Stay as original as possible. But if you've got a movie like the Bill Murray, Throw Mama from the Train. Throw Mama from the Train. That is a comedy version of Two Strangers on a Train, the famous Alfred Hitchcock movie. Now that has an homage to Hitchcock. I think the actual Hitchcock movie, there are scenes of it, one of the characters watches it. Right? So, in that case, yeah, that's appropriate. But if you're doing a drama or you're doing something more serious, you probably want to stay away from that. Because all you're doing is telling the audience where you got your ideas from anyway. All right, so let's say you've got your premise. You've done a little research. You've looked at what's out there. So you don't reinvent the wheel. Big consideration. Don't do what the other movies did. Do it in a different way. At the same time, let me just add, don't go too different. Like the guys who are doing Quantum of Solace, I think they really set out to deconstruct Bond and try to do Bond but not Bond, and I think it just blew up in their face, and I just find the movie absolutely the worst movie ever. I could rant about Quantum of Solace all day long. I hate that movie so much. So, you don't want to go too far in the opposite direction, but you just want to have in your brain, what works and what doesn't work, and sort of know from the outset what to do differently, and try to take those great movies and do your movie one better. All right. So you want to get started and you want to write your movie. What do you start with? Well, the opening scene is very important for a lot of reasons. Number one, if you're selling the screenplay, producers got to read that first scene and they got to go, wow, yes, I'm going to read the rest of this. If they read it. A lot of them won't. A lot of them will get their assistant or their assistant's assistant to read it and do a little capsule. But you cannot go wrong with a good opening in terms of selling your screenplay. It should be, depending on the genre, I like to see the opening of a movie as almost like a microcosm of the movie as a whole, if you can manage that. So if it's a drama, I want to see an opening dramatic moment. You know, again, James Bond, which I love, and it's so easy to talk about in terms of the format. What's the opening of Bond? Well, it's Bond on his previous mission, wrapping it up. So it's like a mini Bond movie. It's not the whole, you know, maybe it's a little bit of setup for what's about to come, but it's not really set up as so much as it's a standalone little short. And those to me are great. It sets the tone for the whole movie and what you're about to see. Now, they don't work for every movie, but you can kind of do it. For instance, in a drama or a romance, you know, you can kind of at least set up the problem with the character and, you know, why their romances aren't working out, or the previous romance, which sort of sets the tone for the future romance. A lot of time it's, you know, the main core of the movie is about two people getting back together who were a near miss, or they were together for a while but they didn't work out, and now one of them's come to the conclusion they made a huge mistake and they're trying to win back the love of their life and blah blah blah. So, you know, in that case, that would really work. In a comedy, that's definitely key. You're gonna see a mini version of, you know, and when I say a mini version of the movie, I don't mean the actual details and plot and, you know, everything you're about to see, but I mean like something that feels similar into the tone and shape of the movie, you know? And you can get into a little bit of foreshadowing. You know, not always. I mean, if you look at another one of my favorite movies, The Blues Brothers, just starts off real deadpan. Real deadpan. It's just Jake getting out of prison and a montage of him going through the prison system and getting all his stuff back, and that's it. That is it. So, you know, and it starts real low, which I think for a comedy and a lot of movies that works. But for modern audiences today, a lot of them, man, they can't sit through that, you know, because they watch their movies on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon. Man, they just want to be punched in the face like in the first 10 seconds, or they're out the door. You know, the attention span, you know, the Blues Brothers was made in the early 80s, so you're still coming off the 70s vibe where audiences, I think, had more patience. They were willing to sit and relax in a movie theater and let something unfold. I think a lot of modern audiences that they just want it all. So in terms of selling a movie, that first scene, it is important to be very direct and big, and, you know, even if that scene gets cut, you know, maybe that scene will get completely cut from the movie, but, you know, at least it'll be a way to sell it. Yeah, I was going to talk about a movie I wrote, but since that movie hasn't been produced yet, I can't really talk about that. All right. So once you have that first scene, that eye-opening eye-opener and the credit sequence, then you're going on to the first act, and you're following the three-act structure. You know, at that point, I like to do a little outline and push it along as I write. You want to concentrate, of course, on the dialogue. Movies tend to be dialogue driven. And so, you know, you can always go back and tweak the description a little bit. I've had producers yell at me both ways. Oh, you got too much description. Oh, you got not enough description. Oh, I want more, you know, camera angles. Oh, I want less camera angles. You know, you want the stuff in the screenplay that's important, that you have to put in there, don't go too nuts with camera angles and you know, unless you're directing it yourself, and then do whatever you want. But you know, it depends on who you're working with. You got to get a read for them. Otherwise, just go for an average amount. You know, don't describe every sound effect or piece of music, or you know, sometimes it's better to put in like general stage direction and general descriptions on things like that. So if you have a scene that doesn't require a specific piece of music, but you want some music in the scene, maybe it's playing on the radio, maybe the character's, you know, just playing it, or maybe it's just part of the whole deal, you can just describe a, you know, in the background a rock and roll song plays. In the background a sad dirge plays. In the background light jazz plays as they speak. You know, something like that. Because sometimes if you mention a specific song, the interpretation of that is, oh, this guy wants this song. I don't want to pay for all those rights, and you know, forget it. So keep it loose in that way, unless you need that specific song. I mean, if you need it, you need it. Put it in the damn script. Worst thing that'll happen is they'll either change it or not buy your screenplay. Another thing you want to get started that helps your screenplay is you want your character to start in a world that is pretty big. Come on, Joni, are you coming back or not? You want the world to be functional even without the events of the movie. So don't make the world feel like, you know, the only events that ever happened in the world are what happens in the movie. There should be other characters and other stuff hinted at on the outside. Speaking of which, I think my video is over. The dog has spoken. All right. That's it for screenwriting tips this week. My name is Tony D, and I'm going to walk the dog.